All right, so I'm making this video as Jason Pargin, who wrote John Dies in the End. I follow him. He does a lot of great content. It's very long-winded, which I love. It's one of the few creators I love to watch the videos because they are longer, but he has a really good voice for talking about things. But anyway, he had an image behind him. It was from, I think, a TikTok or an Instagram, and it was basically talking about how it showed a video store, like a Blockbuster, and then it said, "You'll only get it if you were a millennial. You had to be there to to understand it." And they were romanticizing what it was like to be at a video store. And Jason had said essentially, like, we shouldn't trivialize people's nostalgia because it's an experience, it's personal. But he was like, "But this." And I want to interject something into that conversation. Go follow Jason's account if you're not. But I want to interject into that something very interesting, which is that I worked at an entertainment store, and they're out of business. I'm very happy to hear that because they were a horrible company. And I'm going to say them here because it's not much that can be done now because they're gone. Hastings Entertainment. When I lived in Roswell, New Mexico for a lot of years, I think it was in my very early 20s. I think I transitioned from non-drinking age to drinking age while working at this store. I worked at a Hastings Entertainment, and the people were great that I worked with. Managers are good. The store manager was trash. Both of them we had. One got replaced. That's how bad they were. The other one, she was so onto the corporate lollipop that she just was blind to the needs of actual people. Like, I could tell you tons of stories about working there. Anyway, what was a Hastings Entertainment store? If you don't know, here's what a Hastings Entertainment store was. This was one of those weird things where a business decided it was just going to get its hands into everything. We did video rental. We did DVD, CD sales, and VHS sales at the time. That's how old this is. I'm old. Book sales, and they sold coffee and had magazines in the coffee shop, and they sold novelties as well, okay? If you took, for those that may not understand, let me pinpoint this for you. If you put a Blockbuster, a Spencer's and Hot Topic, a Starbucks, a Barnes & Noble, and I don't know what else together, you would have got a Hastings Entertainment store. And I worked multiple departments because you end up working everywhere. I worked it was called the Hardback Cafe at the time. That's where we sold coffee and stuff. I worked the Hardback Cafe. I worked video rental. I worked music. Music was my favorite department. And I worked that department. But let me tell you how rentals were. Rentals were the worst thing ever, especially Friday nights, okay? Another reference for you that's obscure. Maybe somebody will get this, but Friday night rental nights on Friday nights were as bad as if you ever worked at an IHOP and they did a free pancake Sunday breakfast thing or unlimited pancakes on a church Sunday in a small town. Same kind of hell. Anyway, it was awful. And being on both sides, both having been to rental stores and on the side of being somebody working at the rental side, people constantly came in looking for hot movies that we only had 5 or 10 copies of. That's it. And it'd be gone. That means out of even a town of just, at the time I think we had 30,000 people in Roswell, even if a quarter of those people decided they wanted to rent movies, or a quarter of that quarter, however you want to put that, even if 100 people, put it that way, 100 people wanted to come rent that movie, it probably was not in stock. And I think we did holds in some cases. They could reserve it. I can't recall entirely. I think it might have been for the purchases, but yeah. And then we got limited amounts of DVDs. I think the issue was it was still expensive to get the license to rent DVDs at the time. Because there was a point where that was really cost prohibitive. So yeah, and it was a nightmare. People would get angry with you, like somehow you blighted them. It was awful. So I will say though, and Jason didn't talk about this, but the upside that a lot of people are missing is when you couldn't rent a copy, you would just find something else, and that may have got you to watch a movie you wouldn't have normally. So I think it's important that, I think rental still needs to exist. I think it still needs to be around. I would do that model differently. I did reach out to MPAA and another organization about getting a license. Nobody has responded to me. So if any of you guys know how to do that, I'd be glad to try to open a video store in today's day and age, because I think it could work better if done differently. But if I can't get the people to contact me, it's not going to happen. But beyond that, it was kind of an awful experience if you were having to work it. As far as renting games, I never really rented games. I think the last video game I rented was Super Metroid for the SNES, and I was in sub-teens at that point. I think my parents rented it for me, to be honest. It was from a Blockbuster, and I remember there was this kind of unspoken way of maintaining saves on the cartridge. I don't know how that worked, but I know that each time we returned it and I had to wait a week before getting it back, that my save was still there untouched. which was quite amazing considering the cartridge only had 3 game saves. And this was commonplace for a lot of things. Further back in the day, Legend of Zelda NES, same thing. You could have saves on that cart. I don't know how that worked actually for Legend of Zelda, but it worked, and I had my save still there. You would name it, people would leave it alone until your game was complete. It was really weird. It was only like 3 people had agreed to rent it out and keep it out of rotation without ever talking to each other. But anyway, this video gets too long. Yeah, it was kind of a nightmare. And people would get very angry with you personally, like it was your fault that the movie was gone. So, and I remember just being super, super busy. But I did, even though that store was trash, the people were great, and I did like working that job. But they went out of business apparently in 2016. Didn't know that. I had people that when I had left Roswell that were still working there, and I had kind of lost touch with them. But I guess that explains why they're not working there anymore. Or hadn't worked there, but I think they're on to bigger and better things. Pay was crap, by the way. Working at a time store pay is crap. So anyway, yeah, just my 2 cents on that.